Number one, Ibble Dibble here. Hello, friends. Welcome to part 2 of my Sentebale series. Fair warning, this is a listen-only video. There's really no need to look. As doubtless you all know, Prince Harry and Prince Seiso resigned their positions as patrons of the charity they founded in honor of their mothers to help HIV-stricken youth in Lesotho. Their resignations were the culmination of an epic clash with the chairwoman of the Board of Trustees, Dr. Sophia Chandauka, that outflanked the impassable battleground of their boardroom into the public square, where we've all witnessed how very nasty this altercation is. In her application to the UK Charities Commission, Chandauka alleged poor governance, weak executive management, abuse of power, bullying, harassment, misogyny, misogynoir, and a cover-up as her reasons for quote-unquote blowing the whistle. In other words, she threw the book at them. This is another nail in the coffin for Prince Harry's public image and possibly also cause for a private identity crisis, and I find it interesting and fun to speculate on the dynamics and mechanics that got him into this position. I think the most thorough way to do so is by attempting to determine the probable merits of each of Chandauka's accusations in parallel to the Charities Commission investigation, using all available evidence in the public domain. In the end, when it's finally resolved, we'll be able to compare our conclusions to those of the Charity Commission. For me, it's fun to see where I was right and where I was off. Either I feel vindicated or I learned something, and both are lovely. In my last video on the topic, I explored the accusation of poor governance. If you haven't seen that video, it's linked in the description box below and in a card above. According to the UK Charities Commission, there are 6 key aspects of poor governance: failure to fulfill trustee duties, mismanagement of funds, breaches of the law or the charity's governing document, lack of transparency and accountability, harm to beneficiaries, and damage to reputation. To determine whether and in which of these aspects the directors of Sentebale fell short, I reviewed years' worth of annual reports, appointments, and terminations filed with the UK Companies House, and determined that Sophie's claim of poor governance is quite weak. Because I received many comments from listeners who didn't seem to know the elements constituting poor governance of a charity and the consequent gravity of the accusation, I thought I'd cover them for you one by one quickly now. Number 1, failure to fulfill trustee duties. Trustees have a legal obligation to ensure the charity operates legally, ethically, and for the public benefit. Poor governance can involve neglecting these duties, such as failing to properly oversee staff, implement adequate financial controls, or ensure compliance with regulations. There's simply no evidence of any trustee of Sentebale operating illegally, unethically, or for self-enrichment at any point in the organization's history. Everything was set up by the books. Everything was filed properly every year according to the law. None of the trustees received remuneration. No favoritism was shown to award vendor contracts for events to companies owned by the trustees. All trustees had adequate attendance. Minutes were properly recorded. There's just no evidence of a failure to fulfill trustee duties. Number 2, mismanagement of funds. This can involve inappropriate spending, lack of financial planning, inadequate reserves, or even fraud. In my last video, I explained acceptable cost of fundraising versus revenue ratios and determined that prior to Chandauka's leadership, Sentebale was run lean and mean. No issues there. We may begrudge Meghan and Serena scoffing champagne at Sentebale's expense, but the numbers simply don't show any inordinate spending through 2023. In fact, their ratio was trending downwards, a very good sign, and hovering around 10%, which is excellent. Number 3, breaches of the law or charity's governing document. This could include failing to file required returns, holding cash inappropriately, or engaging in activities outside the charity's permitted purposes. Again, everything through August 2023, when Chandauka took over as chairwoman, was filed appropriately and on time. Cash on hand was not inappropriately held or used. Over the past 5 years, more years than not, Sentebale actually dipped into its reserve a bit, though never in a problematic amount that wasn't recovered the next year, to fund its charitable activities. 66% of the money spent on charitable activities was spent on healthcare, aligning with the original mission of the charity. Of the remaining 34%, 14% was spent on youth advocacy, 12% on education and livelihoods, and 8% on miscellaneous events and enrichment for the children. Number 4, lack of transparency and accountability. Poor governance can manifest in a lack of public disclosure of financial information, inadequate reporting to stakeholders, or failure to address concerns raised by beneficiaries or other stakeholders. Again, there's just nothing to see here, at least before Chandauka took over. Number 5, harm to beneficiaries. Negligence in the provision of services, failure to safeguard vulnerable individuals, or mismanagement of resources can directly harm the people the charity is intended to help. Many people seem to be confusing Sentebale with another pet charity of Harry's in Africa, African Parks. African Parks is entirely separate from Sentebale. African Parks manages 22 national parks and protected areas across 12 countries, but Lesotho is not among them. African Parks employees in the Democratic Republic of Congo were the ones who for decades committed rape and other atrocities against the local indigenous peoples. Kinshasa, the capital of DRC, is 4,200 kilometers away from Maseru, the capital of Lesotho. Harry may have fucked up royally in his role at African Parks, but it has nothing to do with Sentebale, where there's been no recorded harm to beneficiaries. Finally, number 6, damage to reputation. Poor governance can erode public trust in charities, leading to a loss of funding and potential difficulties in attracting volunteers or staff. There's simply no doubt that Harry leaving the royal family led to the withdrawal of donations to Sentebale from individuals, families, and companies wishing to curry favor with UK high society. That is not the same as donors, volunteers, or staff backing away because they believed Sentebale was mismanaged or engaging in illegal or unethical activities. In summary, I find Chandauka's accusation of poor governance extremely weak. So weak, in fact, that they could be interpreted as defamation. And I think that's why she's taking great care to never name anyone specifically in her many public interviews or statements. Her complaints regarding poor governance clearly stem from internal power struggles with Harry. In those various interviews and statements, she's tried to link in the public understanding this accusation of poor governance with an inappropriate fluidity of Harry's role as patron. But Harry and Seiso have not violated the charity's governing documents. Chandauka knew before she filed her whistleblower complaint because Harry and Seiso told her plainly that she would only succeed in expelling them as patrons if she sacrificed every single sitting board member as collateral damage. They very likely didn't expect her to actually go through with this and choose the nuclear option, because what charity chairwoman in her right mind would burn bridges with multiple high-status, well-connected, well-resourced individuals necessary to the continuation of operations simultaneously? In my last video, I called this Sophie's hostile takeover, and I stand by that. This was a game of chicken where everyone lost. Sophie lost, Harry lost, Seiso lost, the trustees lost, and the kids lost. Lots of people on my video called me evil, racist, incapable of comprehending Sophie's upstanding moral character and virtue, saying they stood with Sophie, they were Team Sophie. That's nice. I'm Team Kids with AIDS. And as far as poor governance goes, Sophie is obviously the pot calling the kettle black. Whatever you believe about the other accusations, the new direction Sophie tried to pull the charity in, and the frankly outrageous misinformation commonly held about the timeline of this implosion and the identity of the terminated trustees, this single act of Sophie's, this expelling the entire board at the same time, this wholesale toppling of the entire organization in service of her individual personal and professional goals, is a textbook example of poor governance. It's a failure to fulfill trustee duties. It is a breach of the charity's governing document. It is a damage to reputation. It's undecided if she mismanaged funds. There are complaints about $500,000 being spent on consultants who didn't bring in additional revenue. Also, she seems to have hired over 400 employees in just 18 months, when the organization has traditionally run with just over 100 employees. Lots of people were defending her, saying, oh, she must be counting beneficiaries and volunteers and the families of beneficiaries. That's not what she said. She used the word employee 3 times in her Sky News interview. Likewise, it's yet to be seen if she failed to be transparent and accountable, but Sentebale's business year has historically been September 1st, with their annual report published and filed end of March. Sophie filed to extend the current accounting period from the 31st of August to the 31st of December 2024 and has still not published and filed the annual report. Filing 2 weeks late is fine, 1 month is fine, 6 months is fine. It's not really a breach of fiduciary duty until it's a year or so late, but clearly something's going on there. I don't believe there has been any harm to beneficiaries, certainly not intentionally at least. But I do think Harry and Sophie are both ego driven people in a power struggle over this organization who were perhaps always destined to clash. After institutional funding, Harry is the biggest private donor, but Sophie's family is the second biggest. Just because it seems that in this particular circumstance, Sophie is the one pointing fingers, trying to cover her ass, doesn't mean Harry is above that kind of behavior. He's not. And that's not what I'm saying. He's just not the one engaging in it in this particular dispute. And like I said in my last video, I think both of them think they can do it all on their own, so they'll fight until the last donor. Children of Lesotho and highly qualified trustees donating their time and skills for free be damned. Now, the final thing I'd like to accomplish in this video is dispelling some misinformation. It became very clear in the comments on my last video that there are widely held incorrect beliefs about this. So let's go through some of the comments. A common type of comment was that Harry disagreed with her moving headquarters to Africa, and that triggered this dispute at the board level. That's not true. All the board members who were forced to resign voted in favor of this around 2 years ago now. Another common comment is that all of the trustees were white blokes, Harry's friend. That is not true. I'll get into each of their bios and CVs in a more detailed way in my next video on this topic. But to put it bluntly, that's a gross mischaracterization. People are saying Harry trademarked Sentebale in order to profit from it. That's not true. Sentebale was trademarked in 2023, but it was trademarked by the organization, with the UK charity named as the owner of the trademark. If Harry planned to arrange exclusive relationships as a vendor of this or that product or service to or for Sentebale and thereby profit, that would be a separate issue, but there's no indication that has happened. Regarding bullying, there's no strict legal definition of bullying in the UK. However, it is usually defined as behavior that is repeated and intended to hurt someone either physically or emotionally. Harry and Sophie clashing over the direction and governance of Sentebale is not bullying. And I doubt Sophie can provide evidence. Meghan and Harry sicked the Sussex squad on her, although if she can, awesome, can't wait. People seem to think, based on something Trump apparently said, that Sentebale received $54 million from USAID. This is not correct. That money was divided among multiple charities dispersed over 5 years. I can read a chart. Sentebale never received more than $1.5 million of institutional governmental funding in any given year, and USAID funding was just a fraction of that. There seems to be a lot of confusion over what kind of lawsuit is this? The answer is no kind of lawsuit. Sophie uses the word high court. in a sort of misleading fashion insofar as the Charity Commission is a branch of the court. She has not filed a criminal case against Harry for bullying, etc., nor has she filed a civil case against Sentebale for gender discrimination, toxic work environments, etc. She has only reported the board of Sentebale to the Charity Commission. Which leads into my next point. The individual trustees did not resign because they were afraid of some sort of legal repercussions. If she had sued them, resigning would not prevent them from suffering legal repercussions. The trustees resigned after Sophie filed her whistleblowing complaint with the Charities Commission, and the Charities Commission issued an injunction against the directors whom she complained about, preventing them from holding a board meeting during which she believed they were going to vote her out. They had already asked her to resign. She refused and ignored them. She knew they were going to put the matter to a vote. She knew they were going to vote against her. The only way she could prevent being expelled was to prevent the board meeting from happening. The only way to prevent the board meeting from happening was to file a whistleblowing complaint claiming bullying, harassment, discrimination, or otherwise unjust removal related to being a member of a protected class. The minute the complaint was registered with the Charities Commission, the trustees of Sentebale were rendered unable to do a single thing for the charity. First, while the commission decided whether or not to investigate, and then while the commission investigates. Sophie accused every single one of them of wrongdoing. Therefore, every single one of them was unable to lift a finger for Sentebale, say a word for or about Sentebale until the Charity Commission investigation is finished. That could take months. That could take years. They resigned because it would be unethical of them to freeze Sentebale's operations for months or years. Sophie not only knew this when she filed, she very likely filed for just this reason. The trustees did not walk out on Sentebale. Sophie pushed them out and very promptly replaced them with her own squad. In her Sky interview, Sophie accuses Harry of unilaterally hiring on new trustees via crony votes, but she herself did the same thing 4 times on March 25th alone. Harry and Seso did not tell the trustees to resign. They did not resign before the trustees. They resigned after the trustees in solidarity with them for very likely being unfairly treated and wrongfully accused. I was very surprised by the people assuming that Dr. Sophie has all the receipts and she wouldn't say something that wasn't true because she's a highly educated lawyer. Have you ever met a lawyer? Tom Girardi, Michael Cohen, Michael Avenatti all spring to mind. There are many lawyers who are not ethical and use their knowledge of the law to decide how far they can push their misrepresentations and get away with it. Okay, those were the main points I think people didn't fully know. That's it for today. As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next time for part 3. Doodles! Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.